The Roman Empire wasn't built only on courage and determination. In fact, it was also built on financial debt. We always imagine the Roman legions as honorable, disciplined, unstoppable warriors. But behind those shining helmets and those sharp swords, there was an enormous cost. Feeding thousands of soldiers, preparing their clothing, and keeping them always ready was not cheap at all. Horses, weapons, siege machines, all of them meant money. So how did Rome finance so many wars for centuries? And why does this matter to us today? Because when you look closely at Rome's war techniques, you notice something. The war wasn't only on the battlefield. It was intertwined with the economy. Once growth began, stopping it became nearly impossible. Expansion became a necessity for Rome. Sound familiar? In fact, in the early periods, things were simpler. The army was made up of citizens. Anyone who owned land was called to war when necessary. People used their own weapons, and when the war was over, they returned to their fields. But as the empire grew, wars got longer and battlefields got farther away. An era came to an end. Professional, trained soldiers were needed. At this point, Rome tied the financing of the army to a centralized system. Soldiers were given a small salary. But here was the important point. Conquests became Rome's main source of income. Every new city meant new taxes, new slaves, new mining resources. In a way, war started to finance the next war. And even more importantly, Rome didn't rely only on the income from conquered lands. It also borrowed heavily, especially from the wealthy equities class. It took large loans. This money wasn't given out of patriotism. On the contrary, it was a good investment. They earned interest, gained certain privileges, and seized new business opportunities in new territories. In other words, war turned into a business model. It was done more because it was profitable. Isn't it the same today? Over time, this system changed many things. Commanders became more powerful because they could promise spoils of war. Senators began acting like shareholders of the wars being waged. Tax collectors, logistics providers. All of them took their share. In short, it was the Roman version of today's military-industrial system. But there was also a cost to all this. The empire constantly had to look for money. When wars dragged on or rebellions broke out, Rome used an old but well-known trick. It devalued the money. During Nero's reign, the proportion of silver was secretly reduced. The emperors after Nero continued the same practice. The money was hollowed out. Inflation rose. Trust collapsed. Eventually, the financial system reached the point of breaking down. Meanwhile, the rich became even richer, moving their wealth to safe places. The poor, however, were forced to pay taxes with the devalued money. Public services deteriorated. Corruption increased. The cost of the wars was always paid by the lower classes. Don't we see the same picture when we look at the world today? Massive budget deficits, wars financed through borrowing, central banks trying to cover gaps by printing money, defense companies making huge profits, the wealth of the rich growing, the poor struggling with inflation. Different era, same game. What Rome actually shows us is this: if an economy becomes dependent on constant growth, one day it will inevitably hit a wall. When there is no more land left to conquer, states turn the same pressure onto their own citizens. Taxes rise, money loses value. Today it's not called tribute. But the functioning is very similar. So what can be done? First, you need to understand the system. Most people don't. They think inflation happens on its own, that taxes are unavoidable, that borrowing brings freedom, that growth can continue forever. But most of these are illusions. It's true. You cannot completely escape the system, but you must learn the rules of the game. You can stop playing this game blindly. You can increase your own power, both financially and mentally. This is why learning financial history is important, because it teaches power dynamics. It shows how the system works. After this, whenever you hear about a new war, a new tax, a new crisis, don't just watch. Follow the money. Who lends? Who wins? Who pays? History always says the same thing. Empires don't fall because of enemies, but because they stop functioning.